the results are in. Far from being the toolbox of the future, the laptop and screen time in particular are doing no favours for our young people. In fact, the overexposure to screen time is not only leading to failing academic results, but changing the physiology of their brains. Writing about this in the Herald Sun today and citing several studies was Senior Research Fellow at the Australian Catholic University, Dr. Kevin Donnelly. I spoke with Kevin late this afternoon. Kevin Donnelly, thank you very much for your time.
Always a pleasure, Chris.
We simply cannot underestimate the impact of screen time on academic results and the physiology of our younger generation now, can we?
You're dead right. And I first started reading about this about 10 years ago, especially when Kevin Rudd, as Prime Minister, talked about a laptop being the toolbox of the future. And he put in billions of dollars governments have put in billions of dollars to make sure schools have computers, the internet, students have digital technology. They want to be able to use it in the classroom, for the students to have it at home. But when I started looking into this, a lot of the research into how young children, in particular primary age school children, the way their intellect or brain develops, too much screen time can be very destructive. And there's an English academic, Susan Greenfield, who's been writing about this for many years.
And you just wonder what we've done over the last 15 years in terms of our academic results. We know that they've plateaued, and you just wonder how much screen time has had an impact on that.
Again, the results are not good. I mean, I can understand why parents are often pressured by schools, but that's something parents should be aware of, that in fact, in terms of academic standards, the results aren't that good. And one example of that is the research associated with an international test called PISA, run by the OECD. So there are over 50 countries involved in things like literacy, numeracy, science testing. Now, when they looked at all of those countries, especially the top performing countries, and unfortunately that's not Australia, when you look at the top performing countries, there are fewer computers in the classroom, less reliance on technology, and what those classrooms do overseas is rely more on what the student has on their shoulder, which is a very good computer, which needs to be programmed, as computers do. If you rely too much on technology, it's counterproductive. And that's one reason why our international results in literacy, numeracy, science are not as good as they should be.
And you've written about this today, and you've used the example of what executives and technicians have done in terms of sending their children, this is in Silicon Valley in the United States, sending their children to schools that don't focus too much on using computers.
That was a real surprise to me. You'd like to think that in Silicon Valley, people like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs, who founded Apple, you'd like to think that they were technical nerds, as it were, and that their homes would be full of computers, laptops, all the digital gadgets. But in fact, when they asked Steve Jobs what he had at home for his children, he said, I use books. I surround them with print. I make sure they have a lot of physical activity. I don't let them have computers in the bedroom or laptops. So he was very much aware of the dangers of too much technology, not just on developmentally in terms of a child's cognitive ability, but also their ability to socialise, to interact with others, and to be physically active.
I fear, though, that the reality in Australia, Kevin, is that parents are so busy, they themselves are distracted, they've probably got 2 jobs, they're just trying to get on with life, and they're not refereeing how much screen time their kids are getting.
It is a difficult question. I mean, I was fortunate when Julia and I had children. It was a lot easier in terms of getting a living, buying a house, keeping up with the cost of living. But unfortunately now you have 2 parents working often. They are time poor. But I'd like to believe, as most parents would, the overwhelming majority, if they knew that too much screen time was a problem, they would cut back. And I would suggest that at night time, after they've had their dinner, the kids are off to bed, parents should make sure there are no computers or iPhones or laptops in the bedroom. And parents should actually sit down, especially with younger children, 7, 8, 9, 10, read to them. Make sure they're surrounded by books, picture books, texts. I mean, I know of primary teachers who tell me they'll get a young student in year 2 or 3, when they pick up a picture book, the young kid will swipe it because they think the picture book is an iPad, and it's quite a shame. So parents need to be aware of the dangers.
Yeah, and yet, as you've written today, a small amount of screen time can actually be quite beneficial.
It's a matter of balance and developmentally for the child, what stage they're at. I mean, it's interesting that in some schools overseas, especially in Sweden, many of the Nordic countries, there's a real focus on pen and paper. Young kids have to develop eye-hand coordination. Now, whether that's catching a ball, playing football, baseball, basketball, whatever you want, they need to understand that you've got a hardwire, if you like, the brain, and the ability to use your hands, manipulate. So they're often going back to pen and paper. The other question here is, if kids are on screens too much, they don't learn how to sit patiently.
Yeah.
I've heard stories even at university, lecturers and tutors saying that a student or students can't sit quietly for more than 5 or 10 minutes because they're used to all those images, sounds. They're so used to being on screen, they've forgotten how to think quietly and patiently.
And it's about, as you say, and as a parent, I've seen it, you've got to lengthen their attention span, and screens don't do that for them.